Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today myself and Nolan are going to talk about Full Metal Alchemist, the movie, the live action movie.
Or as I like to call it, a cinematic abortion. I I'm
Exactly.
I'm gonna I'll preface this review by saying that I convinced Jim into this discussion. He doesn't know anything about Full Metal Alchemist, like
Well,
nothing.
that's not entirely true. I have seen it, but I was in college and I wasn't the most sober when I watched Full Metal Alchemist, so my memories of it are a bit like there's parts I remember um, where Al, who's the metal person,
Mm-hmm.
if I'm correct, he
Boy in suit
had
of armor.
yeah, he had somebody inside him like in as a suit of armor. That this sounds I'm making this sound
His
worse.
soul was
Um,
grafted to a suit of armor.
yeah, so someone was wearing the suit of armor, and someone died in the suit of armor, and he did like this. I forget which version it was because it's been a little bit. And I remember like this big dramatic scene, and I was like, "Whoa, this is like next level existential." It was pretty moving, and I that stayed with me. Um, and but and I was the thing is because this has so many different plot lines. I've seen a few of these plot lines.
Mm-hmm.
Before, but then others I'm like, I don't think I watched that series, but I definitely watched that series, or
Mm-hmm.
maybe I don't remember it, but it was such a mess of anyway.
Here's
Sorry.
here's the thing about the live action movie. What they did was they took the 2003 anime adaptation, which like made its own story, and then the second anime adaptation in 2009, which was a much more faithful adaptation to the original manga, although they still left some stuff out. And then
Yeah.
they did the manga version, which is the original written by Hiromi Arakawa. Her pen name is Hiromu, but I'm saying Hiromi because she deserves fucking female representation. God damn it. And
Yeah.
then they had the two movies, Conqueror of Shamballa, which is the ending to the '03 anime, and then Sacred Star of Milos, which is just kind of like a filler movie for the Brotherhood series. They threw that all together, like wrote each plot line on a punch card, on like a punch card, threw them all into a hat. They fucking threw the hat to the wall, and then the cards all fell down to the fucking floor. And then they had a bunch of like Japanese executives like scramble on the floor and pick up the business cards and then tape them to the wall. And they were like, "That's it.
Yeah.
That's our movie."
No, that I mean, it felt to me like watching a comic book movie from the early 2000s before Marvel. I mean, there were Marvel movies before like Marvel Studios was a thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like that Daredevil movie where they combine like 150 issues into one movie, and you're like, and then when you read those issues, you're like, oh, I get why that storyline is so impactful and such a big deal in comics. But when you see the movie, you're like, this shit is stupid. And I think it's like, or like even there's very few comic book movies that can get, or any movie that can get tons and tons of continuity to work. You know what I mean? And like the only one I can think of, I'm sorry I'm using comic book movies for this, but
Well,
is
it's a
the first.
manga, so it's the same thing.
Oh, okay, all right, so not so, but the first Avenger, and even that one isn't the greatest plot wise, but that at least sort of gets it to work. But it still feels like you're pushing in too much. It's like putting 10 pounds of shit in a 5 pound bag. But in this case, you used a 2 pound bag and you still have 10 pounds of shit. So, like, just,
I I think the people think that things like The Last Airbender and Full Metal Alchemist aren't adaptable. Like, I really hate the stigma of like seeing things in live action because people think it's not cool because of how Hollywood works. But I think if like they used practical effects and did really cool tricks and stuff, like things like Avatar: The Last Airbender, Full Metal Alchemist, etc., could be cool in live action. But
yeah,
the problem is, one, nobody wants to invest in an adaptation of a silly cartoon for little boys. Two,
mhm,
they don't attach anybody competent to direct these movies. And three,
yeah,
nobody understands like at its core what the source material is usually about. So like they're more like they seem to be more literal focused in that, oh man, they probably want like all of these moments in there. When really I think fans, there'd be a vocal minority who would complain that, oh, my favorite moment wasn't put in the movie, but like fans in general would appreciate if there was more general, it was just a general good movie, I think.
yeah. Well, yeah, and it's like the same thing with sort of the Death Note movie where it's like if you'd picked one plot line, that would be a movie. But
Hmm.
picking several at once, I don't really understand. Because in the Death Note movie, if they had gone with whoever the kid was with the Death Note book or whatever, and the police detective, or you had gone with him and the girl, those two individual things are movies.
Yeah.
But ramming them together, and this was like 25 different movies. But I almost think, because Fullmetal Alchemist has so many different characters and things, they were trying to do the show or the manga in the movie, and I kind of would be like, well, if you're going to do the movie, I think it should just be Elle and Ed, and not have as many people be as present. Like, it would work as a live-action show really well, but it wouldn't work as a live-action movie as much, you know?
Well, I don't think budget-wise it would work, but structure-wise it would be fine, because you wouldn't really change that much, but... they also, Al seems really inconsequential to the story about brotherhood and family and friends, because this is probably some of the best CGI effects Japan has ever released. Not effects in general, because tokusatsu exist, and I'm not going to even compare those two, but in terms of CGI, this is probably some of the best Japan has chugged out. Because even a movie like Shin Godzilla had really crappy, like, blood CGI, and it looked bad, but the rest of that movie is gorgeous.
They got it to work, like when they had the crappier, what Godzilla started off as in the beginning of that movie. He's like kind of a crappier creature looking, but they were like, oh, he's evolving. They got it to work with it. And this, I don't think they were able to make the sacrifices to make, because they'll have one sequence that is amazing and well storyboarded and well thought out, and you can tell they spent a week on, and then they have others where it's like the what's his name?
Alphonse?
Who's Roy? the fat guy.
Gluttony.
Yeah, Gluttony was embarrassing. And there was a couple I could tell they cheated it, where he's like, she said no seconds, and then they just cut. And I'm like, okay, that's what you really should have been doing for a lot of this movie, is just implication, and because you don't have the budget for as much as you think you do.
Also, I want to point this moment out because I thought it was hilarious. Gluttony has a huge mouth, like a huge tongue, to show his Ouroboros tattoo. And what they did, they didn't CGI it, but instead they just stretched his tongue in post, and you can see it like it's like JPEG-y and shit.
Yeah.
And it's just very clearly a stretched image because you can see the artifacts from it. It's so bad. It's so bad. Like I think the CGI tongue would have looked better, but I think also I don't have much of an issue like with Shin Godzilla. I wanted to go back to that real quick. Like.
Yeah, sure.
Shin Godzilla's first form was meant to be like sort of like an unevolved, like derpy looking mess, because he moves around like he doesn't know what he's doing because he's a brand new life form, and eventually he's evolving at a breakneck speed. But what I was specifically referring to was when his gills, he's breathing, he spews out like bile and like blood, and that looked like really bad CGI. But it didn't matter because Godzilla still looked dope. All of the miniatures looked dope. Everything looked really good, and Anno knows how to direct a scene and make it look very good. Like, he can lead your... Like, he makes those boring-ass boardroom meetings very, like, stimulating because of how he shoots them.
No, that's a very compelling... I mean, it's sort of... It's not like any other Godzilla movie. Of the 3 recent Godzilla movies, it's definitely the best one.
Absolutely.
Being the American one, which I don't think Americans should make Godzilla movies, but that's a separate conversation. And
mostly
Shin Godzilla...
Sorry.
What?
I was going to say mostly because Godzilla is all about the nuke.
Yeah, I know, right? I never understood it. The animated one didn't really work. But the Shin Godzilla is like works because not only did they get those effects and come up with a reason for those effects to be that way, they also had it represent something to the Japanese people, and that's what the original Godzilla is. We're like so off topic, but that's what the original Godzilla, he's supposed to represent something, and represent something that happened to the Japanese people, and I think it like, that connected, Shin Godzilla was like, almost like a full circle sort of thing, like it recontextualized a character who meant something to that public. And I think that's honestly why Shin Godzilla doesn't play as well in America, because Americans, especially older Godzilla fans, still have sort of an issue with the fact that they didn't see Gojira until like 2006. So like imagine like you grew up with a certain kind of Godzilla from 1970 to 2006, and then you're like, wait a minute, this represents something, and you're sort of okay with it. But I think Shin Godzilla, people had to come to terms with the fact that no, it's not just a dumb monster movie. you know, and
It's
I think some people weren't as okay with that. But it is, I like Shin Godzilla. Anyway, sorry.
I love Shin Godzilla too, and this is the last I'll mention it because it is going full circle to FMA. But I think with Shin Godzilla, you can only appreciate it once you have more context to it because you know it's so ingrained in Japanese culture. It's not impossible to get since you know you can understand to an extent the plight of having like the fear of a nuclear war and stuff like that, and having having another country take away. Obviously, I haven't gone through that. My country hasn't gone through that, but you can understand what like Anno conveys that so well through the movie that you know it just works and you understand the way he shoots the movie. Basically, what I'm saying is Shin Godzilla is just a really good movie in its own right, and it like is just very well directed because Anno is a good director and he knows how to do shit. And in comparison to Fullmetal Alchemist, not only like we have better effects than Shin Godzilla in terms of CGI, but the direction is bad. Like the direction is hot garbage.
Well, it sort of reminded me of, and I've heard a lot in the last couple of years about how the early 2000s had really are known for bad CG and bad effects. And it's funny because it's like if they had known how to shoot bad effects, like directors in the 50s and 60s who made horror movies and stuff, there's a lot of those that you can watch and even though the effects are bad, it's not bothering you as much as if I see something like, you know, something from the 2000s or the late 90s.
Like Fullmetal.
Like Fullmetal is like part of the problem. But like that opening sequence, I was like, I mean, it's not incredible. It doesn't like it's not even the greatest sequence of the year, and we're pretty early in 2017.
2018.
But 2018. Sorry. Well, that is it? Well, it
came out in 2017. It released stateside 2018. Who cares? It sucks.
Well, I'm going to count it as 2018. But anyway, okay. So in 2018, I think I saw better sequences in like, you know, Black Panther and all that other stuff, and we haven't had that many movies this year. But I could tell they like sort of gave a shit at the beginning, and it almost felt like, and I know movies aren't shot in sequence. In the opening where he's running around and stuff, I thought they sort of gave a shit. But after that, I felt like it was like it was like cosplay kind of fan film shit after that.
You see, when you were referring to the opening, I thought the 10 seconds where the mother is on screen and then dies.
Oh no, that was not good. That was not good.
No, then they're transmuting their mother, and then they fly around like they're in the Wizard of Oz, and you expect like the Wicked Witch of the West to fly around like, I'll get you, Edward and Alphonse, and your mother too.
No, Sorry, I mean the part where Ed is running from the guy who he thinks has the Philosopher's Stone. I thought that was like that. That's like if you could only watch one part of this movie.
Might as well watch that part because that's the only part that feels kind of like a Fullmetal Alchemist action scene, and that's me being extremely generous because I still think the movie is fucking garbage.
Well, I think that the lead is, if you had a good lead, you might have sort of saved it, but he was not.
I think he was a model. I'm not entirely sure, but I think he was a model.
He was clearly trying to do facial expressions like a cartoon character, but it's like you can't really do that, and you have to. I feel like the director didn't understand that. And it's like sort of like why a movie like Speed Racer worked is it understood like you can't have these American, these Hollywood actors do cartoon faces and cartoon stuff. You can have the world be cartoony, but they cannot, because that's just like physically impossible unless you hire Robin Williams to play every part or something.
I would have agreed with you initially, but I saw Ethan Slater's performance as SpongeBob, and he's a literal living cartoon character. Plus, there are also people like I think what matters is.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't have just said Robin Williams, but if you get the certain right kind of actor, but there aren't very many of them who can really cartoon characters.
A lot of people hate the fake anime acting, but honestly, those were my favorite parts because those were the parts that looked like they were actually like getting into the role a bit and having fun with it. Whereas the rest of the movie is a dour, boring, sad experience, not because of the tone itself, but because the movie is so bad.
Yeah.
But also, if you like, I've watched this movie 6 or 7 times. And
whoa!
So
why?
I really.
Are you okay? Are you okay?
I really like watching my friends suffer, but if you
or yourself also, damn.
Yeah,
I feel bad for you.
But also, if you watch the scene where Winry and Ed first meet up, you'll notice that they use an outtake with her smiling and laughing. and she's supposed to be angry, but then when she starts arguing, she's actually like mad. I'd argue that Winry, in spite of not being a good actor, is still the best actor in the movie.
No, I actually wanted to follow her. I agree with you with that. Where she's a character who's like when she would come back, I was like, oh, okay, I'm sort of a little more okay with this, you know?
Because, I mean, again, I'm not saying she's, like, great, but I'm saying she's still, like, she's at least putting some kind of effort or some kind of work into it. She's trying to be funny. She's trying to act. Whereas everybody else, except for maybe Maze Hughes, is just a dour piece of garbage.
Yeah.
I especially love how they downgraded Hawkeye's role. You know, the blonde second-hand Roy, the Flame Alchemist. All in the show, she was like, she had such a bigger role, but all she does in the movie is just fucking stare. That's all she does, and she has the same stupid face no matter what role she's doing until the climax where, oh god, I can't even get to the climax yet. But do you have any thoughts on like the actors or whatever?
I mean, I didn't really like any of the act. I just thought they were all fairly. It wasn't very well cast, and well, I guess if we're talking about the actors, it is. I did find it interesting that you have this group of, everyone in it is Japanese, I believe. I don't know.
The cast
I didn't look
Japanese.
up there. Yeah, the cast is Japanese, right?
Mm-hmm. I think there might have been like 2 white extras somewhere, maybe. But...
maybe. Yeah. They were Kickstarter backers, so they got in there, I guess.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Sorry, that was lame. But they, but I find it interesting that they could, you know, because the director, or at least on the Wikipedia, says that like no one in the film, even though they're speaking Japanese and they're Japanese actors, no one says anything about being Japanese or anything. They're basically like, because the characters in Fullmetal Alchemist are European, correct? Or right? They're
it's
like,
mixed. Ishvalans are supposed to be the equivalent to like Muslim people or, you know, people from India. Well, not obviously, I'm generalizing. Middle Eastern is what I meant to say.
Yeah, yeah.
General Middle Eastern. Zing people are supposed to be Chinese or Japanese. Roy Mustang seems to be Japanese coded, so he's the only one who should be Japanese. And then Ed and Al are like kind of Greek. They're like ancestors of a dead Greek race of some kind, but also European. But everybody else should be European. Amestris is a European coded country, so they should mostly be European. So I'm surprised that most people aren't calling out this movie for racism. But you know,
well, I think it's because the audience this is appealing to doesn't care. Like, they get what it is. Because they understand, like, what was it when the Ghost in the Shell thing happened and they interviewed Japanese audiences? They're like, oh, well, you know, the character design is sort of based on, like, European stuff. Like, they understand that. But, like, in America, if you try to explain that to someone, they're like, whoa, racist. Well, and it's like, I think it's a different context.
The Ghost in the Shell thing is also a kind of different matter entirely, because some Japanese people also feel like they were fine with it initially, and then when the movie came out, people started getting more upset about it, like in Japan, because it was like the twist at the end of Ghost in the Shell is that the Major, played by Scarlett Johansson, is Japanese in her brain, and that could have been like an interesting thing they did, but they kind of pussied out and just said, yeah, isn't it sad that like she had her race taken away? She's still going to be in a white body by the end of the movie, but you know. And then and then she meets up with her mom, and her mom is like more of like an American woman with a Chinese accent. So they kind of they took like what would have been a legitimately good and interesting idea and just kind of ruined it by their own stupidity. So
I guess I should have said that I meant more before they saw the movie. In the context of the movie, the movie is definitely But before, like when they did those interviews based on the trailer, they were like, it was just interesting to see Japanese audiences and the Japanese public's take on it, where they were like sort of understood where their art design and character design comes from, and in America you can't really talk about that as freely. And in Fullmetal Alchemist, it's like it seemed like I get the impression this did pretty well in Japan.
I have no idea, honestly.
Yeah, I'm not really good. It seemed confusing about how well it did, but it seemed like no one really minded how well it did. You know, I think it. You know, I think that's sort of interesting that I don't think this will make, like, Death Note got attention for that.
Yeah.
And Ghost in the Shell definitely did because it was such a big movie. But I think Fullmetal Alchemist, I don't think I'll see any pieces like in a major movie site about the races of these people. But it's sort of interesting that like if you make a Japanese live action version of an anime and you do this with you cast it the way they cast this film, nobody seems to mind. Like it's just I don't know.
There are a lot of reasons for that, I think, and this is partially my speculation, partially things I've heard secondhand, so take it with a grain of salt, everybody.
Yeah.
But Japan is kind of a super xenophobic country, so they're very much, you know, about Japanese people. I've heard, like, conflicting things that they kind of, like, really like white people, but also hate Americans. And again, this is stuff I've heard, but I've mostly, the consensus is that Japan, both people who live there and outside of it who have visited, it's a xenophobic country. They very much don't care for people that aren't Japanese, etc. But also, race politics don't matter to them as much there. And also, I think also since a lot of people here have the mindset that, oh, it's an anime, so all the characters in it must be Japanese.
Yeah.
That might be also why nobody's really picking up on it, because they don't see a story there, because they, like, it's never stated explicitly what everybody's races are in Fullmetal Alchemist, except for the Ishvalans, which is a fantasy, like, Middle Eastern race. But everybody else isn't coded specifically, unless you read the subtext of the series. So most people, I don't think, really look for the subtext that much. So I think that's why whitewashing is such a bigger deal here, because, you know, you write about Ghost in the Shell and that the major is supposed to be a shell, just a generic woman, you know, because in the movie, in the original movie, she even has, like, there are even people who look exactly like her and they're different people, but they have the same shell, and that's, like, a point. But, and that, so, like, in that degrees, Ghost in the Shell doesn't offend me as much until the ending twist, but... But with Fullmetal Alchemist, these are, like, coded racially different characters, so I feel like... And I understand Japan is a smaller country, so they probably couldn't, like, find white people who could act or whatever, or be these...
Well, it's also, like, could they find anyone, like, I get the impression that these are sort of stars in Japan, and, like, did they want people who are more... quote-unquote marketable, even though Fullmetal Alchemist is a brand and all that stuff, they were probably like, well, who could we get who's a name? And maybe they didn't have a white actor who, you know, I don't think, like, Chris Pratt wants to come over and play Ed in the Fullmetal Alchemist movies. So, you know...
I'm getting that mental picture when he gets mad people calling him short and Chris Pratt is like 6'4" or something. So.
Yeah. Oh, well, I don't know who they would have... I was thinking about, like, how would, like... I mean, it's weird because you don't think Warner Brothers makes films in other countries as much, but apparently they do. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I'm also kind of surprised this is a Warner Brothers backed and stamped movie. They say it's a Warner Brothers movie. This is a Warner Brothers production. So I'm kind of surprised that... well, I'm not entirely surprised, again, given what we know about Japan, but it's surprising that they managed to film on location in Italy, but also have a bunch of Japanese extras. And I watched this movie with Robo Buddy, shout out to her, and she speculated that wouldn't it be more expensive to fly out a bunch of Japanese extras than to just have Italian extras just do it? Yeah,
that is... Because it did, I mean, it was obviously filmed in Europe for the most part, except for probably some studio stuff they probably filmed in Japan.
A lot of the interior shots that look like garbage.
Yeah.
Because this Fullmetal Alchemist is supposed to be kind of a fantasy period piece, which it's very much taking place in a fantasy 30s or 40s, like during the Great Depression sort of thing.
Yeah.
And yet all they do is they get some old-timey looking chairs and books, and that's the extent of what they do with it.
Yeah. I mean, it's... I feel like the anime... Well, I find the whole remaking any animation into live action is weird to me, because, like, why... Like, with a comic or a manga or a book, you're like, I want to see this, like, people moving and, like, a voice to them and all this stuff and, like, see, like, an interesting take on it. But, like seeing Wolverine move physically and have claws come out and stuff, like, that makes sense to me. But, like, when I've already seen it animated, like, I'm sort of like, I mean, I don't really need to see it. Live action actors, unless you're like, I mean, unless, like, if Ghost in the Shell had been directed by James Cameron or Spielberg, which was the original idea,
Like
that to me is a reason to do it. But if you're not going to get them, then why did you do it?
I think that's the difference. Is that I think for playing devil's advocate as to if it's animated, why would you want to see it live action? There's sort of it's the reason why people prefer old cells to digital animation. It's that it has a physicality, it has a grit to it, and the reason why people don't like live action adaptations anymore is because it lacks that physicality and grit, because most of it is CG. Like, I'll give Ghost in the Shell a ton of credit because Rupert Sanders, in spite of not doing well in the story, he did very well on the visual aspect of it, and that he used a lot of physical props. He made like an exoskeleton. He even had it lifting up from like that white vat. And he tried to make it as physical as he could. And like for a newbie director who only did like one movie and then a bunch of commercials or whatever, I gotta give him props for that. I mean, Ghost in the Shell still isn't a great movie, but he put in a lot of effort.
It's a pretty movie.
It's a very pretty movie, and there's a lot of effort, and he genuinely tried. And you can feel that. Whereas with Fullmetal Alchemist and other adaptations like Dragon Ball Evolution, you can't feel that sort of effort or like wanting to be faithful. It reeks of like people who just want to show off their toys. Like, oh, look at our CG department. Look what we can do. And then it's just like they just put a story to it. It feels like a prequel from Star Wars, which is an overused reference, but it's pretty accurate in this case.
Well, no, that's sort of like the era I was talking about when I looked at the CG. It's like the prequel era of CG, where it's like very green screen or blue screen or whatever over anything. And I don't know, this even reminds me of the Disney live action things, which I don't think I've liked any but Pete's Dragon. And because Pete's Dragon actually adapted it, and I sort of am sick of like these movies going like, well, don't you always wanted to see this plot line or this person on the big screen done this way? And I'm like, I don't know if I like I've gone through a whole life of like, oh, I never thought I'd see Spider-Man or this thing or Lord of the Rings on the big screen, all these things. And I've seen those things, and now I'm kind of like, yeah, but why don't you just like make an interesting take on it rather than just think I'm going to be wowed because this property is finally going to be on the big screen, I mean, you're only going to be impressed by it doing that like once. And after that, you're not going to give a shit. It's like when you first saw a movie you were waiting for, you're going to like it more that time. And then when you see it again and see it on DVD, that's just going to lessen it. I feel like this movie's made to just be watched once,
Well, or in my case, 7 times.
Well, yeah, in your case, because I don't know why you'd watch it.
I really just wanted, I honestly, I just like sharing it with friends, and I just kind of had to watch it over and over again to get everybody's perspective, because I have a lot of friends who love Full Metal and hate this movie, but, I was gonna say, also, like, again, I think it's just a matter of, talent and execution, and you're right in that I think we've just had so many shitty live-action adaptations, everybody's kind of missed the, sort of, like, potential the medium has, because you can still make a very interesting-looking movie if you have talent, if you have a good director, and you have good physical props and locations, and you actually put in, like, even The Last Airbender made, like, a water tribe set. It looked like garbage. For the most part, in the actual movie, but if you saw like stills of it, got up close, there was like a ton of details, and it looked really nice. But just Shyamalan is such an incompetent director; he made it look like shit.
Yeah, or like I would even be okay if someone made a One Punch Man movie if they just did like a few of the episodes and made that a movie, like the first 3 or something. You know what I mean? I don't really actually want them to do this, by the way, but I'm saying like if someone like actually sat down and like did like what a good director screenwriter should do when they get these properties, and like, how do I contextualize this as a movie?
Reinterpret it.
Exactly. Yeah, just reinterpret it. And I feel like the problem with these things is they're not really doing that. And the Fullmetal Alchemist movie might be the worst offender, just because it's like it's not reinterpreting; it's interpreting too much. And it's like watching a car wreck of plot lines, It's like...
Yeah, but also, I didn't cover this earlier, but I'll bring it up now since it's more relevant. They adapted plot lines from so far as episode 1 to episode 50 of a 60-episode series.
Ooh.
So, those really, really awful dummies that
at the end of it.
Yeah, those were from the end of the series in Brotherhood. Those were from the end.
that whole thing at the end, I was just like, did you just needed a horde of army, like a horde army thing at the end? That's
Of
just
zombies.
all I felt. Yeah, it just like felt kind of like superfluous. Like they're like, well, we have to have this. So
it was dumb in the anime and the manga, and it's dumb here. Fuck you.
Yeah, no, it's like, why are you? I don't know. It's too much of it felt like just another big blockbuster, and I think like, why would you want a Full Metal Alchemist movie if it's just going to be fit into this like stupid, you know?
I feel like a lot of the issues were I don't even know how much the quote unquote executives, which us internet critics refer to as the collective of hive mind that make decisions, even though that's probably not entirely the case. But
yeah,
I wonder how much meddling there was in this movie. How much there were people who said we need to have Roy Mustang, burn Lust, because that was a huge part of the original series. And then they're like, well, yeah, but then the climax goes to him and not Ed. And they're like, too bad, bitch.
Because I feel like the director seemed, from the little I've read about the director, that seemed to really want to make this movie. And it felt like almost like a director dying on his own sword for this, like, and making his own bad decisions, even though they feel a little more corporate. Like, I think there's maybe certain shots and stuff, and I don't know. See, I don't know the Japanese film industry currently as well enough to make a call like that, but I mean, he definitely, like, especially the way, like, his costume, like his jacket, I was like, am I at like this is cosplay? Like, it felt like he was the kind of person who would think like all these things coming together were a good idea. Like, this felt more like Bryan Singer's first X-Men than, which I don't mean that as a compliment. But
yeah, like where they take the literal designs and just add textures to them that.
Yeah.
I think you're right. I don't know if we talked about this or if I talked about it to someone else, but the Marvel Cinematic Universe's costumes look a lot better because they sort of take them literally. Like, imagine if they took the classic Iron Man suit and they just translated that, and it looks like a guy in like a metal leotard.
Yeah.
Imagine if they did that. That's what the Fullmetal Alchemist movie is like. It's that bad.
No, they didn't think about changing it for a movie. And I think that's one of the things about, like, particularly Lord of the Rings, which Peter Jackson lost this when he made the other Hobbit movies, is he was very, like, on the internet constantly, like, updating people because people were so critical of him making Lord of the Rings. And he said, like, look, I'm making a Lord of the Rings movie. If you want to see a Lord of the Rings movie and understand the sacrifices I have to make this a movie and make it work as a narrative, then you'll be on board. But if you want me to recreate everything, that's not going. And, like, that's sort of what they need to learn how to do with this. Is like, learn how to make a movie and not, like, because everyone says, oh, well, fans want this very faithful adaptation thing. I'm like, I don't think fans, like, maybe the 4 or 5 fans who will be really vocal about it, but honestly, like, more people will be happy with, like, more people were happy with the 89 Batman at the time, and even after they know this history and how it's incorrect. And I still like that movie. It's just more of just, if you manage to contextualize it correct. And that's what Marvel works with, It's like, I'm not mad that Civil War wasn't exactly like the comic. I like it because it works as a movie and within their own thing.
I think people get mad and also don't understand it because they think being faithful is a very literal surface thing. You can also be faithful by, staying true to the themes. And the Fullmetal Alchemist movie doesn't do that because they're more concerned with, like, fitting in all these moments instead of, like, the themes of the show, which is, like, family and friendship and brotherhood. The subtitle of the second adaptation. And Ed and Al have a collective screen time total together as it's like 10 minutes, if I'm being generous.
Yeah, they're not there to because for a while it was like, why does that? I don't know. It's like, why wouldn't you keep him around? He's such a cool sidekick, like having this suit of armor with you. I just thought that was. Yeah,
but because they made him CGI instead of a practical suit of armor that some big guy could wear. They shot themselves in the foot because now Al can't be in too many scenes or else he's too expensive to animate. So
because he was easily, of everyone in it, probably. I mean, I remember liking him in the original, but in this, I think I liked him more than most of the characters. Just because he was cool to look at.
The series mostly takes place from his perspective anyway. I think in 03
Yeah.
especially. In 03, the beginning narration where he talks about equivalent exchange, one of the most iconic moments in the show, that's from his perspective, and the show mostly takes place from him or Ed's perspective, but mostly his. He's our through line to like all this bullshit. And now he's hardly in the movie, and when he's in the movie, he looks like he was animated by people who animated PlayStation 2 cutscenes. Japan, like, there's people who animate who can do like realistic humanistic acting and then character acting, and the people who animated Al were character animators, and you can tell because he doesn't move like a human being. And for all intents and purposes, he may be a soul grafted to a suit of armor, but he is a human being. He knows how to move like a human, so he wouldn't be doing these over exaggerated hand gestures, and he would be more stoic and like still. And they thought, oh, well, we can't have that because otherwise the shot will be boring. And instead of thinking about ways to direct this scene where it looks more visually stimulating, they just decided to just have him, like, wave his arms around like he's at, like, a fucking rave party.
Yeah, it was... I don't know, this movie. Did you want to talk about the finale, I guess?
Yeah, sure. Let's get to it.
Or was there other things? Sorry, were there other things you want?
Not that I know of. Like, I mean, there's a shit ton we could talk about, but I feel like we should probably just do the finale, and then we could just talk about weird nitpicky things that bothered us.
Okay, cool. I guess. Well, one thing is like this movie's like super long, which is not great. But then, as I getting to the end, I was like, man, it feels like it's gonna wrap up any minute, but there's like 7 minutes left or something. And then the credits start, and I was like, what the f-? It's like 5 to 6 minutes of credits in this thing. Which is too much.
The movie gets faster the more you rewatch it, but I think that's the same for every movie. When I first watched this movie, I felt like I was trapped in my chair for like 20 hours. And honestly,
it feels so long.
The movie was paced so poorly, I felt like I was marathoning like the Harry Potter movies.
No, it
like a shitty like a shitty fan Harry Potter series.
Yeah. Well, I think if a fan made this, I would give it more credit.
If this was a fan film with like no budget, that would be like, oh, this is pretty impressive. It's very shit though, but this is like a professional thing. And also, they made a lot of weird changes because they're very strictly adapting this movie for the most part, up until Roy quote unquote shoots Mace Hughes. Because in the original show, it's Lieutenant Ross who shoots Mace Hughes, and then she gets framed, and Roy Mustang hunts her down. But in this movie, Roy is the one who frames Mace, and then Ross hunts him down, and they literally introduce Ross through her bringing sandwiches to Ed. This movie is also kind of has a little underlying current of like sexism, and I really hate talking about that, but every important female role goes to Winry or nothing, or no, they're cut. Like every other female in this movie except for Winry does nothing.
Well, I guess Lust. Well, yeah, but all the shots of Lust are of her boobs.
Yeah,
it's like that happens quite a lot. It's like showing her cleavage, which I was like, it's like, wow, this is like really blatant about. I guess she is Lust, so you could make an argument there, but it was still like they aren't very. I remember there were far more female roles in the anime than there were
in both animes. Yeah. But also, Lust was also a much more clever, interesting character because she knew she was a sex object in the eyes of men, so she took advantage of that, which was really smart and led to a lot of moments where she actually seemed like a sadistic, conniving person. Because she took the male gaze and all this stuff and actively used it to her advantage, which is smart because it's like, yeah, I know I'm like a titty girl. I'm going to use it to my advantage. I might as well just deal with it. But there's nothing like that in this movie. They mostly focus on her stupid nails.
Yeah, the nails thing was like, I mean, it didn't look great. None of the villains really looked that great. And I sort of wish they hadn't had these characters in this movie.
Envy looks like he is wearing garbage bags.
Was he, like, I noticed his name came up in the call at the end, I was like, is he like a big deal, or is he like the Jared Leto of Japan or something? Like,
No, I don't know, but Envy is one of the biggest villains in both series. Like he's really popular, and he was the dreadlocked guy. And
yeah.
his costume literally looked like they took like Glad garbage bags and just wrapped them around
No,
his shirt.
it looked really bad, but I was just surprised, like in the credit roll, like that he was there so early. I was like, oh, he must be somebody, I guess, but I don't know.
Yeah, Lus. I think if I were to pick like whose costume was the best, I'd probably say Lus, since they use a lot of fishnet and whatever, which would make sense given her, sex appeal, whatever. But
no, it was Ed's coat, which I want to wear all the time.
I don't know if I think I mentioned this to you off the call, but I remember mentioning how his coat doesn't look like a period appropriate coat because the inside material, which is like the lining of the coat, has this polka dot pattern, which I don't think they would have had in the 30s. It looked like a very artificially made lining.
They had polka dots on. But
no, but it's like a suede, like polka dotted lining.
Yeah. The red is the issue because it's just like it just sticks out, and I think there's a way to do. It's hard to do comic book or any like kind of very colorful costumes that you see in more manga or comic books or anime and bring it to like a live action world, but they clearly need to kind of calm down with the red a little bit, and it would have probably worked a little better.
I'm going to be controversial and say it should have been near black or near dark brown with a hue of red in it. That probably would have looked a lot better.
No, I'm with you with that, and it's kind of like this is like that kind of those kind of things where they used to like mute down those colors, and it wasn't until Marvel happened people were like, oh, we can have colors again. It's cool, because people thought it would look embarrassing.
Yeah. Also, I know people have an issue with Marvel's color grading, but this movie kind of just shows how bad it can really be. I've never had an issue. I've never had an issue with Marvel's color grading for some reason. It never bothered me. I noticed it had a look to it, but it never really drove me nuts like some people do. Maybe I just don't have an eye for color grading. But Fullmetal Alchemist looks like garbage.
Actually, I saw part of the Avengers yesterday, and I was after watching this, and I was like, wow, the Avengers looks amazing.
Yeah. Also, speaking of colors and stuff, the actor for Ed actually dyed his hair blonde, which is pretty respectable.
I couldn't tell.
He dyed his hair, but Hawkeye clearly had a wig, and for the child actors, they just spray painted their hair gold.
Yeah.
I still laugh at that one the most because everybody points out how bad his hair, Ed's hair looks as a wig, and it's no, he actually dyed his hair, but nobody points out the kids who are clearly just had a little bit spray painted on.
Yeah. The kids thing at the beginning, by the time you get to the end, that feels so long ago that you're like, oh, right, yeah, the thing with, the mom.
I also
it's just, doesn't connect.
When they show Ed at the Gate of Truth for the very first time in the movie, they use older Ed and not his young actor because they know they could not get the performance of this kid. And,
Oh, and in the anime, is it a kid who's in there?
Yeah. In the anime, he's a kid when he sees the Gate of Truth and gets his limbs taken from him. And I don't know if this is.
I did. No, sorry. Keep going. Sorry.
I was gonna say I don't know if Japan has the same standards as we do because I think over here seeing a child's limbs mutilated would probably not be okay. I don't know if it's the same in Japan. So a lot of people say, oh, the kid actor probably couldn't do it. And I kind of am speculating that maybe it's because of a ratings thing. The movie would probably be a hard R or something if you see a kid with a stumpy bleeding limb. But also I'm willing to bet that the child actor just couldn't do it, so they were like, let's just use the older one.
I mean, they should have used the child actor where he's in. What is that white place with the black thing? What is that place called?
The Gate of Truth.
Yeah, so when he's at the Gate of Truth, it should because Al's voice as a suit of armor is a kid's voice.
Mm-hmm.
So it's it doesn't make sense that Al would be an adult. That was sort of confusing.
Are you talking about at the very end?
Why would Al's body still be an adult even though his voice is a kid? I understand aging and all that stuff, but it's if it's a magical realm or whatever, Didn't they like not be aging in that?
They explain that in the anime, but not in the movie. Basically, what happens in the anime is Al's body is taken to the Gate of Truth, and his body is like aging, but but it's like solely connected to Ed because he used his blood seal to like Ed used his blood to seal Al's soul to the suit of armor. So Ed like eats a lot and sleeps a lot because he's like eating and sleeping for Al too, which is why Al looks like so anemic. Because his body was taken away and it's just floating in like a purgatory. But they explain it a lot better in the anime, and I'm just kind of giving you the cliff notes. But they don't do that in the movie.
No,
so I don't blame you for getting fucking confused, because they do such a horrible job at explaining how the soul grafting and the transmutation stuff works.
Yeah, I mean that's something that holds back a lot of movies, is when you sort of need like an instruction manual to explain what the fuck's going on. I think it's a bad storytelling. I mean, this movie had a lot of bad storytelling anyway, but it like kind of shows that like how bad it was, that there are parts that I'm like, I think this maybe, I don't know.
I also think it's just funny because they don't really understand what they're doing in terms of explaining alchemy, which is honestly a very simple, like, if you wanted to explain alchemy to somebody, like, pretty simply, you draw a circle, each circle means something different, and then you can transmute stuff, but you need equal amount, equivalent exchange. I just explained it in 10 seconds, but in the movie...
You explained it better than the movie, because what goes over at the end, that the circle thing, I was like, oh, there's like a logic to that? I just thought they drew a fucking circle or something. For people who understood my explanation, let me show you how the movie explains it. They show a circle with a bunch of shit in it, and then it transforms into a doll. The kids bring the doll, and their mom is like, oh, you guys are so good at alchemy. Then she dies. Then they say, let's bring our mom back. And then they just list off the ingredients of a human body, and then they just throw them in the middle of a circle, and then they make mention to like equivalent exchange for 2 seconds. Then they press down on the circle, and then all of a sudden they have metal limbs, and then the preacher is very like impressed that Ed can not use a circle to transmute. If that sounds confusing, that's because it fucking is, and that's because that's how they tell it in the fucking movie. I mean, they almost weren't. They almost made this for people who've already seen. They didn't. This was not made to be a crossover. Although if you look at the poster, they sort of treat it like it is, probably marketed as. But I'm assuming this show was a huge hit in Japan, so they probably went, well, if we get half the amount of people who watched it, they'll get it. So who cares? You know, which is bad storytelling. It doesn't. I hate kind of companion piece theater. I think that's like kind of shit, especially for a movie like this. It should have been able to stand on its own, which this movie like barely. I mean, this movie needs like crutches to walk, so you know.
Yeah, it's very surprising how bad. Like, okay, this is something that kind of bothers me even about Ghost in the Shell, Dragon Ball Evolution, all this Last Airbender. You make a movie, and oh, this is for the fans. And then you make a movie that won't please the fans either. Yeah.
Well, the this is for the fans thing is such a shitty thing people say, because it's basically like this isn't for the critics who like have taste and like watch movies all the time and know the history of film. This is for the rubes, or as we call them, the fan. Like, it's just like they always say that in the most insulting. I hate when they say that shit. It's like, you didn't make this for the fans. Come on.
I would argue critics don't have taste, but I understand what you're saying. But
well, I don't think every critic is amazing, but I think oftentimes they forget when they say that is a lot of critics are fans, and I think when they get, I think what they're trying to act like is like, oh, this is for just your average kind of fan kind of person, but it's like you're not really literally doing that when you're making these movies. You're just making a shitty movie, and your explanation is like, hey, your fan that just likes being in a dark room with something projected on the screen would love this, so you know you shouldn't be as tough on.
Jim, I just think you're a Marvel fanboy and you have a DC bias. I think you just need to take a step back and, you know.
Hey, I liked, yeah.
I liked Suicide Squad, Academy Award-winning Suicide Squad.
Academy, you know, that's the Academy Award winner with the lowest Rotten Tomatoes score of all time is Suicide Squad.
Wow, that's not surprising.
I was surprised. It was like, so 90 years of the Oscars, and Suicide Squad's the worst one. That's hilarious. That really says something. That shows how bad they screwed up.
Yeah, or how much they were paid off. Either way.
Yes, probably both.
All right, so and I guess we should get back to the finale.
Yeah.
I want to make mention of Shao Tucker, who I think got the biggest shaft in this. For those who don't know, Shao Tucker was a villain in Fullmetal Alchemist. He's honestly one of the most iconic ones, in spite of not really being in the series for too long. Basically, he's a life-sowing alchemist, which means he makes chimeras that can speak. And he has a daughter named Nina and a dog named Alexander, and you can see where this is going. In the movie, he transmutes Nina and Alexander together to make a talking chimera. And then in the show, the character named Scar kills Nina and Alexander because they're obviously in pain and suffering, and then kills Shao Tucker. And then in the movie, they arrest Shao Tucker. Nina's nowhere to be seen. And then it turns out Shao Tucker was working with the general, who's the main villain, who was only like an extra character in the original shows, who's now like a lead villain.
That character, I mean, that should have been its own. That plotline is its own. It's not a plotline you put in there. This is like Joel Schumacher, Batman and Robin shit when you're doing that sort of thing. But they shouldn't have done that, because that was a cool story. But at the same time, it felt like why is this in here? Like, it just felt like an extra. Like, you either do him right or you don't. Like, to me, it was like it almost felt like the lust and envy, those people should have been more of the, if the movie that they were making, or make a different movie with that character. But that was like a horrifying scene. You're like, that's pretty depressing. And then I assume she died right after that happened. That's kind of what they imply.
In the shows and the manga, she's dead. In the movie, we don't hear a fucking thing about her after that. And the reason
I thought it was just implied with the ball by itself that she died. That's what I thought, but I don't know.
I kind of just assumed that was like a visual shorthand for the loss of innocence. They'll never be able to play together again, sort of thing. But it's not. Oh, okay. It's not. I wouldn't even count that as explicitly or subtextually stating it. That's just like, remember the ball? Do you remember that? Remember how much fun they had? Oh, and they
really pushed that ball imagery. They're like, hey, we came up with this ball imagery thing.
Yeah, it's like a visual. It's a visual motif or symbolism that doesn't fucking work.
But yeah, also, and even when it was introduced, I was like, this is like, it didn't feel like you're supposed to, when you do those things, it's supposed to be organic in the film, where you're just like, oh, okay, this is another scene. Thinking about it, but it was like glaring when it first did that. So I was like, okay, well, this is clearly going to come back somehow, because they had to put this shit in here. It was like, I don't know.
I like also how most of the scenes where Nina and Ed are in the same area, he's talking to Shao Tucker about sewing life alchemy, and then when Winry and Ed are on the train to find Marco, hey Ed, remember how you were Nina's favorite? Remember that? And then we just flash back to one scene of them playing together instead of just having a scene of them play together when Al and Winry and Nina were sitting on the lawn together. By the way, I also love how even when Al is on screen, they'll do everything they can to make sure he's not moving.
Yeah, they were. I mean, other than the fight that the two of them have, they don't really make him much. Although, did he move that much in the anime? I don't.
He absolutely did. He was an active fighting character, and he moved a lot. But
I mean, he's a cool character. They should have just found, because he's kind of like a metaphor for the whole movie.
They should have just made a suit of armor. Done.
Yeah. Put a wrestler in it or something, and designed it in a way where you can't see his face, and you would have been fine.
Yeah, because you're gonna dub over it anyway. So what's the difference if you use
Yeah. I mean, it's just a physical performance more than a vocal.
It's like Darth Vader or Creature from Black Lagoon. You just get somebody to look the role, and then you just do whatever later. But, back to Nina and Alexander. The point of their death and their transmutation together was to show Ed that alchemy can be used for fucking evil, and but because he never got to the extent that like he knew, oh yeah, evil people can use alchemy. Alchemy isn't inherently evil. But it's like, no, that's like the first time he realizes, oh shit, alchemy can fucking fuse people together and ruin lives. And in the movie, you don't get that. They like say it. They never really talk about it. Ed never. In the 03 anime, Ed reflects on Nina a lot, and then in Brotherhood, he sort of remembers every now and again. She isn't like it's more of a turning point for him in the Brotherhood anime, but in 03, it's a constant reminder of how fucked up alchemy is. But in this movie, like, it's just clearly there for fan service, and like there's no real sort of weight to it. It's frustrating and annoying, and I hate it.
Yeah, I mean that. I don't know. There's just too many of these plot lines in this movie. That's the biggest problem. Is like they should have, if they had done a 90-minute Fullmetal Alchemist live action movie, I feel like. But I don't think it would have been perfect because there's too many. This is like the Spider-Man 3 problem where you think you could take something out and fix it, but there's just too many things. It's just it is ruined. You know, it's not good. You know. I
don't even think if that would save it even because there would still just be too many cooks in the kitchen to make it. It's just like a incompetence all around. They don't know what they're doing. So even if they did like take out a lot of stuff, it would still be fucking bad. It would just be less egregious because the reason why I enjoy this movie so much in terms of like it's really awful sort of way, I don't even consider it as so bad it's good at movie. I consider it as somebody who loves Fullmetal Alchemist in all forms it comes in. This movie just misses the point entirely while also shoving in as much shit from the shows as possible. So it's just kind of like this weird Frankenstein failure, and it's just so funny to me in terms of its existence. It's the worst adaptation I've ever seen, hands down, ever.
I mean, it's the worst. It's the worst anime adaptation I've seen of the three I've sat through recently, right?
Yeah,
Death Note, Ghost in the Shell, and this. This is like the point where it's like you started with a movie that had a huge marketing campaign and a major movie star. You moved down to a movie that just got released on Netflix by a promising director who has lost all his promise at this point between Blair Witch and Death Note. And then you moved on to a film that was made overseas, and unless you knew about Fullmetal Alchemist, didn't even know this film got released. Like, this is where we are. The next one will be like a fan film of Vampire Hunter D, where a 12-year-old is wearing a big hat. His mom's like sun hat that she wears at the beach. Yeah. Although that sounds great. If anyone wants to make that, I'll probably review it. So,
I'd argue that that Ghost in the Shell is still one of the better anime adaptations, and like I said, I don't consider that to be a good movie. So,
I mean, I don't know if I want to say that, but it was. I think design-wise, I think the other thing that really hurts that film is like it's doing the Blade Runner thing, and like we got a Blade Runner sequel this year, which was actually really well.
Yeah,
you know,
I'm speaking solely from the pool of anime adaptations.
No, I know. I'm sorry,
but no, that's fine. I'm just wondering if you've seen a better one because I haven't seen too many. Like I've heard the Rurouni Kenshin films are really good, and I'm not counting like Edge of Tomorrow or any of the manga adaptations. I'm speaking strictly anime.
I mean, I would say Speed Racer is still the top to me.
Okay.
Speed Racer's gonna be.
I'll have to see Speed Racer then. I mean, if anything,
Speed Racer's not perfect, but Speed Racer gets sort of the soul of. But it's almost like the good version of this kind of crappy idea of taking on, because it takes on the Racer X thing, it takes on a ton of plot lines, which it sort of gets to work. It's sort of like what I was saying with Captain America First Avenger thing, where it's like, you really shouldn't do these things, like narratively, it's a bad idea. And it's amazing when they get them to work, and they get the Racer X thing to work in Speed Racer, but it's kind of like the best version of what this adaptation process people are using it.
Yeah. If anything, Fullmetal Alchemist just made me want to see more stuff and made me want to rewatch the original shows to see how they hold up.
No, that's same with me. Is like all of these, like after I saw Ghost in the Shell, I was like, I still haven't rewatched the anime, and I should because I have a lot of nostalgia for the anime. I saw it in theaters during its original. So
the original Ghost in the Shell is a fucking gorgeous masterpiece. I would.
Yeah.
Everybody go watch Ghost in the Shell, man. Like, all of the Fullmetal Alchemist movies suck. Like, all three of them.
Yeah.
Go watch Ghost in the Shell.
I mean, the funny thing is, of the three of them, I didn't really want to watch anything from Death Note. That's the only one I didn't... I was, like, kind of done after that. So I was like, I've had enough. I'm
Yeah.
fine.
I think you feel the same way of all three properties had you not seen the original ones. So I feel like you have to have that context going into it. Otherwise, I could see like Full Metal Alchemist, Ghost in the Shell, and Death Note turning people off of all those franchises entirely.
Well, that's the thing. I think none of these things have successfully done is the difference between them and even though I'm bringing up comic book movies a lot, I'm sorry, is that those managed to cross over in that people who never read comics will watch a comic book, and I've yet to see an animated movie that got anyone who doesn't like anime to watch them.
Yeah.
You know, like Ghost in the Shell, maybe the closest, but I don't know anyone who was like Ghost in the Shell. I can't wait for them to remake Akira. You know, it's like, like it doesn't inspire that kind of.
I also see people getting heavily upset about Akira being like pro-American once remade, and to be honest, that's more of the manga. The manga is very much more politically driven than anything, and then the movie, it's like kind of like, oh yeah, remember the nuke patriotism, and it's like that was more the kernel than anything else. If anything, the movie would be fine getting like westernized.
I think
the movie actually adapts the manga better because they focus on Kaneda and Tetsuo for the most part.
Yeah, I mean the movie has almost too much. That movie has a lot going on, but that really works because it kind of gets the whole feeling of Neo Tokyo, which is that like there's all these things going on. There's like all these people living on with each other. The world's falling apart, and you get that kind of. Akira is more of is almost as much an experience as it is a good movie, which is what I love about that movie because it's just like I've watched so many reviews of people saying like, you know, the plot doesn't work in a more strict how we're supposed to analyze the plot way, and I'm like, yeah, but fuck that. Akira's awesome. And
no, Akira is awesome, but it's not a plot-driven movie. It's like the best thing about Akira is that you're right. It has a lot of stuff going on, but its core, it all centers around Kaneda and Tetsuo and their clash.
Yes,
that's all it revolves around, and that's why it works. You need to have that core where it branches off from there. Whereas
that's like Full Metal Alchemist doesn't have the core with Al and Ed that you need to its full developed thing, you know.
And Death Note doesn't, and Ghost in the Shell is the only one that comes closest to that because it's all about the Major and her amnesia trademark every plot ever.
Yeah.
But with Death Note, it's like, oh, there's L, there's like Turner, there's the girl, and then there's the Shinigami, and then there's all this and that, and then with Akira, it's like, yeah, there's political unrest, there's like all this shit going on, but at its core, it's Kaneda and Tetsuo, his powers are awakening, and it's gonna like rip the world apart.
Yeah.
That's it. That's why Akira is so great.
Yeah.
It has that core.
I mean, to me, I almost think Akira is one of those films where, when I reviewed it this summer, and thank you for making me do that, but I sort of was like, there's just so many reasons to like this movie and to dive into. I understand why when I was 12, I just kept watching it because like it is the kind of anime that makes you want to watch an anime 17 times.
Yeah.
Because you like want to dive into it. Like there's so much there. It's so rich. It's like it's amazing.
Yeah, but like again, it's just that Kaneda and Tetsuo are like in their eventual boiling over is so great, and then the movie has a spectacular climax, and it like comments on how everybody has a power inside of them and how they need to control it. It's broad themes, it's broad shit, and it's a style over substance movie, but that's good. That's fine because the little substance that's there, it hooks you like in your ass. So
Akira is just.
And that's why that's why I'm not as worried about Akira being adapted into a fucking American movie because if they adapted if it was much more politically driven like the manga, I would be worried. But Akira at its core is about two good friends who drift apart due to the unrest in the world falling apart around them, and one person discovering a power they have that they can't control, which is pretty fucking broad. So
I still think if they're really going to get a prestige kind of TV series where like you get like adapt it differently, like don't make to me I think that's the only way.
Don't make it like Neo Manhattan or something.
Just do it like each volume is a season or a bunch or 5 episodes or something like that.
Yeah.
And I think that would hook people like even anime fans who love Akira like would be like, oh, I'm actually interested in how you would do that, and like that's kind of intrigues me, you know, and you'd want to watch that.
I'd say make a spiritual adaptation of Akira rather than a straight one. Even if you did get Japanese actors or whatever, just like kind of reinterpret it, get the rights to it, and just make your own thing, sort of.
Yeah. But it's like,
I'm reminded of, like,
the other thing with...
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Oh, the other thing with it is just like the animation in that is so good, and so there was so much money, and it was sort of a unique deal even making that movie that it's sort of like a lightning in the bottle thing. I find it a little weird. When they're like...
It's part of why it has its identity.
Yeah, like, because like that director never got to make another... I didn't see Steam Boy, but to my understanding, it's not Akira 2 in any way. And I think like that was a very unique set of that's like a Gone with the Wind circumstance, where it's like when they made Gone with the Wind, that producer never made a film as epic and as big as a cultural landmark as that, and it's sort of like that way.
Although I think the problem with cultural landmark movies like that are no matter how good anything that follows is, it won't be that. So
yeah,
the thing with Akira is if Steam Boy came first, it probably would have been the cultural landmark, but it wasn't. Akira was. So Akira's the one that remains.
Well, I haven't seen Steam Boy. I need to see Steam Boy.
I'm just saying it's like it's the matter of Akira came first and sort of, you know, came at the right time, the right place. That's a lot of lightning in the bottle is not only a good staff, but also just coming at the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
I'd say, like, obviously not comparison to Akira, but Friends, which is a show I fucking adore to my heart forever.
Yeah.
Is a lightning in the bottle show in that they found 6 actors who have the best chemistry on television, and then writers who got what the characters wanted and were like, and then managed to make 10 pretty consistent quality seasons up until pretty much the very end. So
yeah. No, I would agree. There's like there are some exceptions to it throughout the run of that show, but for the most part, like they really got
as is all TV though. So
yeah, no, you run that long, fall off at a certain point. But anyway,
fatigue,
so yeah, but Fullmetal Alchemist sucked, and
go watch any of the other things we recommended. If you want to see a bad live action adaptation, go watch Ghost in the Shell. Fuck it, I don't care. Ruin your own life. I'm gonna go drink booze. Because that's the... I think
if you were getting to see the Fullmetal Alchemist live-action movie, this review, even if you were like, oh, it sounds bad, you'll probably still watch it. Like, I feel like this movie is pre-sold in a way. Which is why I think the reason Netflix pays for anime adaptations is because they know you and I will watch.
Yeah.
And we'll watch it once. Or, hey, that works out for me. I don't care. You know, I'll spend $30 million on that.
Yeah, they have a better chance at getting money through watching being watched that way. It's sort of like Netflix kind of is sort of a double-edged sword because now we have a dumping ground for so bad it's good movies or just awful movies. In general.
This I'm sure this like Cloverfield, and even what happened to Annihilation in every places in America, it got just pushed out on Netflix because the studio didn't believe in it. So,
which is a shame because from what I hear, it's a really good movie.
It is really good.
I want to see it.
It is sort of a shame because it's actually cool to see in the theater too.
I miss sci-fi horror. I miss sci-fi horror. God damn it! I also miss Japanese horror.
It's kind of like horror but sci-fi heady stuff. But it feels unnerving. You'll feel like you're in this weird dimension space. Anyway.
Yeah, no, I prefer unnerving over scared because I don't scare easily. I jump, but that's usually reactionary. I never get scared or uneasy.
I don't think it would scare you in like a horror movie sense, but it might give you. But
I like feeling creeped out. Like I feel like that under the skin feeling is what I like in horror movies. So
no, there's some genuinely like heady concept. It's a cool movie. I think the more. Because I reviewed it, but then like later I was like, man, I like sort of still think about. I prefer. I wasn't a huge fan, but I like it.
Do you remember that one like movie that was made really cheap about like a time machine and it was like filmed and it had really really heady.
Primer.
Yeah, Primer. That one.
Primer's amazing. Primer, and the guy did another, which is also good. They're both. He's a really good director. I wish they were giving him stuff because he's just so great. It's unfortunate.
Yeah, Austin McConnell did a video on him, and he got me interested in his works, and I want to see it eventually. I have so much shit to watch. I hate it.
No, what are you saying? That's like my life forever.
Yeah. I'm reminded of that clip from the Eric Andre show where Hannibal goes, I think we should just stop production for like a year. There's so many movies coming out I want to see, but I'm never going to see them. And then the guest asked, like, what would you see if they stopped production? Lord of the Rings? and it was a Lord of the Rings actor who was on, so...
That's very true. It's like, man, if I had all the time in the world, I would watch all these, like, cool movies, and you're like, oh, cool, Star Wars.
I want Hannibal Buress to, like, narrate my life. That would be great.
Oh, man.
Please
Hannibal Buress is great. So, Fullmetal Alchemist, though.
Yeah, that sucked. Final thoughts, Jim? Final thoughts? Anything you wanted to mention?
I would say it's definitely maybe the worst movie I've seen this year of 2018. So that's something.
It's already March and you've already found a worst of the year contender.
I think... is it? Now I'm going to have to look at what I've... Yeah, I think... yeah. Was it worse than Godzilla... the Godzilla animated or Cloverfield Paradox? Well, all my worst movies are on Netflix. It really says something.
Mm-hmm. Honestly, yeah. I think we're reaching an equilibrium in the blockbuster world of the Western film where we sort of have, like, we're getting, like, oh, it's okay, or, oh, it's kind of, mediocre or bad. But we're not reaching those extremes like the Fullmetal Alchemist movie. So I think we're breaking new ground. Yeah,
you're right. Because this is breaking new ground in badness, because, like, even that Godzilla movie, it was too many ideas, but it didn't... This hit awful really early. Like, it was like... The Godzilla movie and Cloverfield Paradox, in the beginning, even though you heard they weren't good, you were like, you know what, I'll give this a chance. I'm going to give this a good 20 minutes. And then you knew it was crap after a certain point. But this was like really early on, you're like, this is not good.
If you want to be super nitpicky, you can say from the first frame it looks bad because the Netflix original film title card had a bad font choice. That was the calm before the storm. That's like you standing at the edge of a pier and you can see the darkest, blackest clouds that are spewing out red lightning, and like you can see like skulls in the clouds, and you're just like, man, I should probably just go somewhere else, but you just want to watch and see what happens. So
you're like this. I mean, this looks like I'll probably die in this storm, but it looks cool. So let's do it. And that's kind of like what Fullmetal Alchemist is. You're like, wow, they made that thing into a live action thing, and it looks horrible. But I guess we're doing this,
I know people are gonna go watch it because of how bad we say it is, and I'm gonna warn you: don't come to me and say, oh, Nolan, you promised me it was a so bad it's good movie. I think it was, because I'm a huge fan and I just love awful shit. But if you're just like so bad it's good entertaining movies, this has nothing for you. Unless you're a full
this is not like The Room or something. This is you know what this really is it's like depressing. Early 2000s crappy superhero movie. That's what it is.
Yeah, it's like Steel.
This is like...
No, it's not even Steel. Steel is funny.
See, I think it's like Daredevil. Ben Affleck's Daredevil. It's like Ben Affleck's Daredevil or whatever other one. Like that Punisher movie, which I don't remember the first one.
But if you're highly compelled to see this movie, which I would compare to like the 90s Captain America movie, you either need to be a Fullmetal Alchemist fan to get any sort of enjoyment out of how awful it is, or you need to watch it with a group of friends, or a group of friends with Fullmetal Alchemist fans in them. That's the only.
I would agree with that.
If you watch this by yourself, you're just going to feel miserable. Trust me.
Oh, well, thanks. That's what I did.
Well, I made you do that, and I don't have any regrets. So,
I did watch it. I actually watched it for the most part, in bed. So that was.
I'm surprised you didn't fall asleep. Damn.
I actually fell asleep this movie more time thinking that I movie ever. So that's an endorsement. I rewound it though. I was like. I didn't want to be like you to refer to a part, and I'd be like, yeah. So I was like, I have to really watch.
Netflix, if you want to put a quote on the poster, I fell asleep in this movie more times than any other one. Jim Gisriel,
Yes.
2018.
Yes. Early on when I started watching it, I watched on my computer in bed, and then I watched just the beginning part, and I fell asleep. But I had the wherewithal to shut my computer while I was asleep, so that was nice. So I didn't get too lost.
Did your wife ever like catch you watching this movie, and she was like, "Oh my god, what are you watching?" Did she ever?
I watched this movie in so many parts, but it was like I think my father-in-law it was like you can just put it on, and I think he like just got on his phone and walked out of the.
He doesn't even want to watch it with you. He's just like, yeah, you can watch it. I'm gonna watch something.
Because I was gonna watch it that day, and I had all these plumbers and stuff, and like they didn't want to look at it. It was like I was doing. Nobody wanted to look at it.
God.
So I very publicly was watching the movie, which I noticed everyone was like, "This is a movie."
Yeah. Hey, you should watch it with Sophie. Hey, Sophie. Look at the big suit of armor, Sophie.
I think she saw a part of it, but I think she wasn't as into it. But yeah.
Here's another ringing endorsement, Netflix. My baby wasn't even into watching this.
Gisriel,
2018.
Those are the quotes. I fell asleep during this work. Anything? When I was getting towards the end of it, I downloaded it on my phone, and I have a rather long commute. And I thought, I'll watch 20 minutes of it on the subway. I'm sitting down at sleep. So,
yeah.
I fell asleep once I'm straight this movie.
When you Photoshop the image together, you should put those quotes on. It made me fall asleep. My baby wasn't even into it. And then,
well, that I'll put at the end, because I'm going to spoil this amazing quote. Like, people got to wait till the end, to hear.
Absolutely.
Because it wasn't that it was boring. Well, it is that it was boring. It was also that it gets so disinteresting, but it was also disinterested in itself. So how could I be interested?
It's sort of like watching a Tonka playset crash. It's not that interesting, but it's kind of like, I'll watch it anyway.
It's like watching someone make a Jenga thing and then lighting it on. And then you're like, why am I doing this with my life?
You're like, why didn't you just take it apart? That would have been much more satisfying.
Yeah, why are you burning it now? It's like I have a whole.
That's the perfect analogy for this movie. Instead of just taking all the pieces out and letting it fall down in a spectacular wreck, you decide to burn it because it's more effort and it looks flashier.
Yeah, and you just.
Yeah, all you're left with is a pile of boring ash.
Yes.
I think we can't top that. I think we've set our piece on this awful movie.
So if you want to comment in the comments below.
And subscribe if you would like to. Special thanks to our Patreon supporters, Nolan again.
Yeah.
Nolan for the third month in a row.
Well, there are other people than you. There's a whole list of them.
I'm getting Nolan. Nolan again. Oh, there's Nolan, that good buddy of mine. Nolan.